Nairametrics Financial Advocates held their Economic Outlook webinar titled Resetting Nigeria's Economic Growth Trajectory over the weekend to enlighten stakeholders, business owners, and Nigerian consumers on what the year holds, or second half of the year, as well as far as expectations in regards to government reforms and policies. Here are some excerpts taken from the webinar, including Taiwo Oyedele of PwC saying that fuel subsidies are underreported as far as costs in Nigeria.
So on fuel subsidy, I'll be very practical. So there are three things I think government should do. Number one is we need to count the costs and report it correctly. So subsidy cost is being underreported. So depending on who you ask, they say it's 4 trillion, it's 6 trillion. But that amount, one, excludes FX subsidy. So for petrol, you get, they're using our dollars as 415. The guys who are importing diesel are not even getting it as 415. So think about the difference between 415 and about 620. That's almost 50% subsidy that is not accounted for. Number two, there is the tax subsidy. So all over the world, you find between 20 to 80% tax of the pump price, right? About 20 to 80% of the pump price is tax. Nigeria is not collecting that tax. That is cost. That should be accounted for. And finally, you need to ensure that overall, you are sincere in your communication with the Nigerian people. We cannot afford Sri Lanka situation. This was how they started. And then they got to a point where they didn't even have fuel at all. They only had enough to last one day. I pray that will not happen, but we need more than prayer. We need to take practical steps and urgently so.
The CBN has a lot to do. And I think they should switch. My own first thing is just advice that they switch from monetary framework to inflation targeting. Inflation targeting, we've practiced it in this country, and we saw the results, though it was a bit late. But I think we need to switch into that. Harmonizing the exchange rates. At some point, I think 4 or 5 years ago, there was a time we had like 5 or 4, I think about 4 different exchange rates in this country. There should be a conscious move towards having a stable and harmonized exchange rate, because that will create an avenue for, should I say, confidence or clarity for anybody bringing money from outside the country, knowing fully well they'll be able to repatriate the money. You know, when you're going into another economy, profitability now splits with different risks. The risks that the chances of what you had planned will come to fruition to the extent that your 1 naira will turn 1 naira 50 kobo. There's a risk there. But the risk also subsists that even if you made 2 naira instead of the 150, by the time you're converting the currency back, is it available to even go out? And by the time you're going out in your own local currency, will it now mean 80 kobo? That is what is killing foreign portfolio investments.
I'll just talk about the countries that I have pinned down. And a lot of these countries interest me, but there's something very unique and systematic about almost each of them. And I would focus on China, Singapore. I'd also talk on Japan, and I'll talk on South Korea. You know, there are a number of countries we can draw learnings from, but let's even look at a lesson each. Let's talk about China. The interesting thing in China is today we see quite a lot of strength and sophistication around technology. But it will interest you that China actually started its own reform through agriculture. The basic reason why agriculture was important was the recognition of food security, the recognition of moving away from poverty and elevating quite a lot of people from poverty. So China leveraging investments in agriculture, policies on agriculture, created from poverty to prosperity for its own country, for its own citizens, where every single person was encouraged and incentivized to be able to make those investments in agriculture, even before World Bank wrote the blueprint or supported the blueprint for the growth of China. So you can see that these are people who are already looking inward to see how can we even create the changes and catalyze growth and empowerment for our people. It's not a very easy thing to do, but to have the humility to embrace and empower people, where agriculture and food security became a big and major record for China. I find that remarkable. Big, great opportunity also for our country. So much that we can do with agriculture across all of the arid regions that we have. Even every single person has seen that it's huge enterprise for all. Okay, so let's also talk about Singapore, another country that I'm super passionate about. Singapore is almost from zero to something. What are some of the things that drove Singapore's success? The biggest thing that drove Singapore's success is visionary leadership. And of course, we all know and have seen what Singapore did. They deliberately and systematically tied politics to economic growth, because you need political stability to actually have economic growth. And in pushing all of the political stability, it was very clear that you cannot have economic growth without free market. So Singapore was very particular about creating free market principles where labor was possible. They were just very open with regards to immigrant labor. Anybody can come from any part of the world and live in Singapore, grow in Singapore, develop in Singapore, but labor was available. So it wasn't an issue. There was also the low tax rate. Singapore totally recognized that you did not have to have a huge tax burden that would crush individuals and crush organizations and crush growth with regards to making it possible to also attract even international foreign investors. And so it grew on that, because it was very important to actually keep the country attracted to investors all over the world, and encourage businesses also to thrive and grow. Now, Singapore was very deliberate about infrastructure. It totally recognized the need to build infrastructure. And it will amaze you that one of the biggest was public health, transportation, and transportation and housing. Now, think about the things that are very basic to every human being everywhere in the world, almost making it seem like a socialist strategy. And with that regards, you can find housing. Almost everybody can own a house, and we are paying pittance to government over a long period of time. And government is developing this and say, in 30 years, you can pay over this period, you are not crushed. And what is very important to human beings? Shelter. So imagine if you've got great shelter, you're not thinking about where to lay your herd. Then you are also able to innovate. You're able to create businesses and catalyze and stimulate economies.
I think the small and medium-scale enterprises should be the engine of growth in this country. That the activities cut across all sectors, all subsectors, all productive sectors of the economy. But I want to look at them as a subgroup. And the key thing is that we need to encourage productivity and productive activity at that level, where a mom and shop could set up a small business. That's actually how China grew. And you can't replicate what happened in the place like South Korea, where they had a chair. But the appropriate thing is, if an economy, a country with a large population, you need to make sure you have a kind of highly distributed or diverse productive base. And that's where the SMEs should come in. But if you talk of sectorial productive sectors, then I would say beyond agriculture, and when we talk about agriculture in most countries are basically focused on food security. There is no economy in the world today that has become industrialized because it's an agricultural economy. Agriculture is basically an extractive industry. That's the base of human industrialization. That's how humanity started, when we moved away from pastoral or activities into settle in one location and doing agriculture. So it can never be the engine of economic growth, economic diversification. It is necessary. It's absolutely necessary for us to have what you may call food security. So emphasis on agriculture is important, but it's not what will lead us to become a sophisticated, industrialized, and developed economy.